Namaskar. Good evening, everyone. I welcome you all on behalf of RV Learning Foundation and the author, Sri Balkrishnan Sannyasi, on the book release of The Chronicles of Kashmir. We all are here tonight together at this time and in this virtual space because there is a common thread connecting us all, and that is indeed Pandit Amarnath Vaishnavi. I would like to welcome our distinguished guests. We have with us today Dr. Sudhir Sopuri, the plant scientist, ex-vice chancellor of Jawaharlal Nehru University and a Padma Shri awardee. Sir, warm welcome to you. We also have with us Mrs. Kaveri Bamzai, who is a noted journalist. She has worked for 30 plus years with Times of India, with the Indian Express and the India Today. She is the former editor of the India Today. Kaveri ji, welcome. We also have with us Shri Arvind Shah, who is a noted writer, has many published works to his credit. A very warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
And we have with us Shri Raj Nehru ji, Vice Chancellor of Shri Vishwakarma Skill University and the J.C. Bose University of Science and Technology. Nehru ji, we welcome you. The Chronicles of Kashmir has been a journey of 7 years, almost 7 years. And I remember in year 2009, 2010, I told Amarnath Vaishnavi ji that he should write his life story, he should pen it down so that we can bring his story out to the world. He started writing his diary, and since he used to travel quite a lot, he misplaced the diary. And he had written quite a substantial part of his story, but he didn't give in. He started writing all over again another diary. But when he had reached the same stage where he had left the earlier one, he found the previous one. So in this, a lot of time went by. Unfortunately, he could not complete his story. And the book Chronicles of Kashmir basically constitutes the story which he has personally penned down. And then it was the primary research conducted by the author, Sri Balkrishnan Sannyasi himself, wherein he met a lot of people who had closely worked with him. And then he himself was also aware of a lot of details because both of them used to interact quite a bit with each other. And the Chronicles of Kashmir was born. We also had a lot of deliberations about the title of the book. So we thought of many titles. We said we should keep it Jaikara, or we should keep it plain biography. But then Kashmir and Pandit Amarnath Vaishnavi are inseparable. So it would not have been fair if we would not have talked about the Kashmir in the title itself. Having worked for 7 long decades before the exodus of 1990, for almost 45 years at the grassroots with the people, and having been a conduit between the people and the people in power, and having brought in a lot of changes which are historic in nature. So we penned down this title, and rest you will know about the book from Kaveri ji and from Mr. Shah. To begin with, I would like to request Dr. Sudhir Sopuri ji to do the honors of cutting the ribbon of the book. And I would also request all of you who have the book with them to please display the book later once this is done. I'm glad at least we have this technology and we are able to do this. We had planned a physical event earlier.
Can you see this?
Yes.
Pleasure to release this book by Praja.
Thank you, Dr. Sopuri. Thank you very much. And now I would request Mrs. Kaveri Bamzai to present the review of the book. Kaveri ji, over to you.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be with such honored guests today. All of you know much more about Kashmir than I do. You're so well versed in the state that, well, it's no longer a state, but our homeland. I would like to take this opportunity of reviewing, not just reviewing, just in a way putting down some of my thoughts upon reading this book as someone who unfortunately doesn't know so much or as much as all of you do about her state. But it was such an eye-opener, and I'm so thankful to Rohini and all the people behind this book that they actually put it together. I think it does tremendous service to future generations in setting the record straight, and I think that was much needed. We know that history is always written by the winners, and for some reason the Kashmiris have been portrayed as losers in this unfortunate battle that was thrust upon them. And I'm so glad that this book actually corrects the record on so many fronts. And there are just some that I would like to highlight. All of you know about this, as I said, much more than I do. But I would like to put the record, to put it down in some points and to actually remind people that the Exodus didn't just begin one fine night on 19 January 1990. It happened over a period of time. And of course, we all know that this was the seventh wave. But the journey of the Kashmiri Pandit, I think that has been brought out so beautifully in the Chronicles of Kashmir. I have to say that it's a heartbreaking memoir. Often you have to put down the book because it reminds you of what we have left behind. It is tragic, yes, but it is also a story of tremendous resilience and tremendous courage of our community. And it makes me feel particularly proud. I've always been a proud Kashmiri, but it makes me feel even prouder after reading this book, knowing what we have gone through over so many centuries and of course decades. So just a few points that I'd like to highlight. One, I think, is the wonderful inclusion of Swami Vivekananda in the book. Rohini and Balkrishna ji, I'm really particularly grateful to you because I think we tend to forget the association that Kashmir had with Swami Vivekananda. I know he was in fact an honored guest of an ancestor of mine, Pandit Kaul Bamzai. He spent some time there as well. And I was really delighted to read how much he influenced Amarnath Vaishnavi ji. And the other point, just before I get into some of the details of the book, is that, we celebrate so many of our heroes, so many people who brought us freedom, who fought for our freedom. We tend to forget some of the ones who have not necessarily shouted about themselves from the rooftops. And I think Pandit Vaishnavi was one of those silent and almost invisible fighters for freedom. And freedom didn't end or just didn't begin in 1947. Freedom for us has been a continuing process. Freedom to celebrate our festivals, freedom to celebrate our religion, freedom to speak the language that we grew up with, freedom to read, our scriptures. So there are a whole lot of freedoms that didn't just end or begin in 1947. And here is where I'd like to highlight one of the things that has always struck me is the public celebration of festivals in Kashmir. And when I read Pandit Vaishnavi ji's role in the public celebration. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And when I read about Pandit Vaishnavi ji's celebration role in actually celebrating Janamashtami in a public way, I found that so fascinating. I'd just like to substantiate each of my points with some passages from the book so that it can give you the context. On page 65, he writes, Balkrishna ji writes, Pandit Vaishnavi ji also started the custom of celebrating Janmashtami in Lolab and Sogam. People who were scared since the year 1947 and had given up celebrating festivals started getting involved again. In 1959, he got the NCC commission, and in 1960, NCC unit was sanctioned for Handwara Higher Secondary School. Pandit Amarnath was transferred back to Handwara. His students and others who knew him gave him a warm welcome. Here also, he initiated the celebrations of Janmashtami and other festivals in Bhadrakali. Dasera was also celebrated. Though people showed reluctance to celebrate the festivals initially due to the fear that they had inherited, he was instrumental in reinstating in them the confidence once again. The custom of celebrating Independence Day, Janamashtami, and Dashera, initiated by Pandit Vaishnavi, became a regular feature in the districts of Baramulla, Kupwara, and Sopore. In Sopore, Dasera used to be celebrated on a grand scale. Thousands of people used to watch the same. In Handwara, the students were very loyal to him. They would do anything for him and would assist him in organizing such celebrations. I think this is very important. It has always, as I said, struck me as to why we haven't necessarily been as public and as vocal in the celebration of some of these festivals as some of the Hindus from the mainland have been. I'm glad that this sort of corrects my impression. That was one. The second thing which I found very interesting was the Praja Parishad movement. Again, this is something that is not necessarily available to all of us who have read a particular kind of history. From 1949 to 1953, his role in the movement, that's been highlighted beautifully. The other thing was, of course, which I have heard from my grandparents, the Parmeshwari Handu incident, which led to the Kashmiri Pandit agitation in 1967. Again, this is something that I'd just like to read a little from to remind all of us how, the history of agitation also that the Kashmiri Pandits were involved in. It wasn't as if we were always pliant and, silent and, happy to have all our rights trampled. So I think that's very important. I'd like to just highlight that. Parmeshwari's mother filed a complaint with the police. Balkrishna writes, however, the Kashmiri Pandit community launched an agitation under the leadership of All State Kashmiri Pandit Conference, Yuvak Sabha, Sheetal Nath, with Pandit Shiv Narayan Photedar as its president. The Hindu Action Committee was formed to lead this mass movement, and Pandit Vaishnavi was the chief activist of this action committee. Sri Amarnath Ganju, it lists a whole lot of people who were in the limelight. Among others were Pandit S.N. Kachru, Pandit Gopi Krishan Kaul. See, these are all the invisible heroes of our community whom we really haven't paid attention to. I think a book of this nature, which actually lists them and tells you their role in all these movements and these agitations, it's high time something like this was written. And I'm so glad it has been. All leaders were addressing huge public meetings in the Sheetal Nath in the evening hours regularly, and Pandit Vaishnavi would always start his lecture with Jaikara Har Har Mahadev. Many arrests were made and people were lathi charged on the roads. Um, then it goes on to talk about during the said summer agitation, starting from the historical Sheetal Nath Maidan of Srinagar, Pandit Vaishnavi several times took out his turban from his head and got it drenched in the water pot from the neighboring houses and wiped the tears of the agitationists whose eyes were sore due to the tear gas shells from the police. It goes on, of course, to talk about what happened and how that agitation sort of had an unfortunate end when the Kashmiri Pandits believed the promise by S.P. Chavan, which of course was not Y.B. Chavan, which of course was not kept. Then I think it also talks a lot about the communal violence that preceded 1989, which again I think is very significant because we cannot look at what happened on January 19th, 1990 as one event. There was a series of events that led to it, including the attack on the Janmashtami procession and the attack on the temple. Then it talks, of course, about the mass exodus and the assassination of Tikalal Taplu, which was, I think, a tipping point in what happened in Kashmir. May I just read a little, just read a little about that to remind us of that horrendous time. It was in the late 1988 when the selective killings of minority community by terrorists had started that Pandit Vaishnavi, Dr. Sushil Wattal, and Mr. Pushkar Nath Karnail met Mirwais Maulvi Farooq at his home, Mirwais Manzil, and had an open discussion with him regarding the fate of the minority community in Kashmir. Mirwais Farooq's response was positive towards the Pandits. The trio, however, left the Mirwais Manzil anxious about the future. On September 14, 1988 at 11 a.m., Shri Tikalal Taplu, who was the tallest leader and the state vice president of Jammu and Kashmir BJP, was assassinated. The previous night, he was with Pandit Vaishnavi at Habakadal till 11 p.m. He had walked with Pandit Vaishnavi to escort him till Kanyakadal, as Vaishnavi was on his way to his home in Chhattabad. Tikalal Taplu was concerned about Pandit Vaishnavi's safety. Ironically, in the morning when Pandit Vaishnavi came to know about his death, he went to his home. A lot of people had gathered from Srinagar and some nearby villages. There were all kinds of people, mostly Hindus and some Muslims, rich and poor, cobblers, cleaners, and taxi drivers. Thousands of people joined the procession towards the crematorium. Pandit Vaishnavi delivered speeches which were full of anger towards the people who had killed his friend. The Hindu youth were also very angry. While the procession moved peacefully at some places, Muslim youth pelted stones on the procession. The Hindu youth were also very emotional and angry and about to retaliate. However, Pandit Vaishnavi requested the Hindu youth to exercise restraint. He lay down on the road and told them if at all they had to retaliate, they would have to step over his body. You have to have immense courage to do something of that sort. Looking at the anger in the procession, Muslims shut down their shops. The procession peacefully reached the cremation site. Sri Lal Krishna Advani, Sri Kedarnath Sani, and Sri Baldev Singh also attended the funeral. This was just to give you a sense of how difficult life had become then and how tenuous it all was. I think because we are such a resilient community, because we're always looking at the future, because our parents have inculcated in us the belief that education is a self-motivator, we tend to sometimes just forget or have selective amnesia about those terrible events. And this is not to say that one has to be embittered or one has to build a series of resentments. But if we don't acknowledge our own history, and if we don't acknowledge the trauma of the past, we will not be able to face the future. And I think that is something that when I see my parents' generation, when I see the generation before that, they have suffered such tremendous losses. In fact, there's a wonderful note at the beginning of this book from the late Arun Jaitley, which says that he was so surprised to learn that Pandit Vaishnavi did not have a home of his own. How many of us actually don't have a home of their own? All our homes were either literally stolen from us or sold at throwaway prices. So I think that sense of going back, I know that, we now have the chance to go back, but you can never turn time back. And I think that is the biggest loss for the community. But books like this, occasions like this are very, very significant, I think, in reminding us of what we have lost and what we need to regain. And I think when we meet together, even if it is virtually, we are able to not just put some salve on wounds of the past, but also think of what to do about the future. We have our education, that is our biggest asset. What do we do now? How do we return the Kashmiri Pandit to the centrality of the narrative of Kashmir, which is where he and she ought to be? Why has the Kashmiri Pandit been erased from recent history? And why should they be erased from recent history? Or, in fact, the entire history of Kashmir? I think those are significant questions that are raised when one reads a book of this nature, which also takes you back to the Kashmir that we all know, which is the Kashmir of Lal Ded and Haba Khatun, Kashmir of, now I'm so happy to hear young people singing couplets from Lal Ded or Haba Khatun, or trying to revive their own language, trying to relearn the language. These are things that I think are very significant. And as I said, even the celebrations that we seem to have forgot at some point, those rituals, I think, are very significant. Holding on to those is something that we need to do. So really, for me, this was, Rohini, thank you very much. It was really an eye-opener of a book. I strongly recommend it to others, and certainly people of my generation who perhaps don't know as much. And I think it's time we are able to correct that. It's time we're able to go back into the past to relive some of the good times, to remember some of the terrible atrocities that were heaped upon us, which again, this book chronicles. I just couldn't bring myself to read some of those, just the list of people who died, were shot, other unfortunate things were done to them. I could not bring myself to read that. But I think it is important to remember that, but yet not, I think, that hatred, use that for something positive. And I think the positive thing that we can do is to really bring ourselves back into the narrative. And that is something that we need to do very urgently. So Rohini, thank you very much. And thank you very much for inviting me to review this book. This is not really a review, it was just some random thoughts, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Kaveri ji. Thank you for being here and for presenting this beautiful review. And now I would request Mr. Arvind Shah to present his book review. Please unmute yourself.
नमस्कार, मैं और वो था हमारा शायर नहीं.
हाँ, you are audible now.
हाँ, नमस्कार. नमस्कार सनिया जी साहब. नमस्कार रोहिणी जी, शायर नहीं मैं गुल जुगलित. नमस्कार. बुपर अंग्रेज़ में से पेपर पढ़ूं. I'll just read it. I have written it, and I'll read it. Today, on the occasion of the release of the book Chronicles of Kashmir, I recollect a story told to me by my mother. One day, the story goes like this. One day, a child put a question to her mother. The sky is the ceiling on the earth, but there are no supports to hold it in place. Why the sky does not fall on the earth? Oh, dear mother, please tell me why the sky does not fall down. The mother told a story to her child. She said, there lived a man named Ramu in a village. He was very sober and determined and loved his village immensely. He took great care of the village, its flora and fauna, soil and air, loved every individual around or at a distance. He kept a purpose to live, loved the sky on the village and the earth that made the village. Once a couple came into the village. It was very cold. It was cold season of the year. The evening and the pale sun had just set, leaving a feeble radiance of the last luminance of the day on the border of the sky. The insufficient rags on the bodies of the couple neither did give them due cover nor protection from the weather. They were in pathetic condition. They abused the village and the people of the village. It was getting late into the dipping light of the day for the cold night to fall. Ramu, listening to the cursing, abusive words from the couple, came running to the couple. He showered a lot of compassion on them, comforted them to take them to his place for a guest treat. Ramu and all the villagers loved the couple and made them comfortable to live in the village. Soon the couple fell in love with the village as Ramu did, and they lived in the village and served the village for good. They also loved the sky and the soil, the people and all the things of the village as Ramu did. Then the mother said to her daughter, it is the people who love their motherland, serve the people with love, and help them to be part of the compassionate human community, make the pillars that support the sky, not to fall on the earth. So these are the people who work who make the pillars to support the sky so that it does not fall on the earth. Reading through the chapters of the book and getting close peep into the life of late Amarnath Vaishnavi made me understand that here is the biography of a person who stands. I don't use the past tense, who stood, I use the word present tense, who stands, because he is enshrined in the book, who stands as support for the sky on this part of the earth that we call Hindustan, the Bharatvarsha, not to let the sky fall on this pious land. It is this class of people who, as Padma Shri Professor Sudhi Sopovi writes about Vaishnaviji, I quote, a selfless person and courageous person who brought hope. His contributions were not limited to the sky of Jammu and Kashmir, as the author Bal Krishna Sannyasi writes in his author's note, I quote, Amarnath Vaishnavi was no doubt worried about Kashmir, but his thoughts always perceived Kashmir as a part of the bigger picture, unquote. The book is written in 10 chapters. The very first chapter, Kashmir, the land of his birth, gives an inkling into the further reading of the book. Reading into the pages, direct, and in between the lines, it becomes clear that the glory of the habitation on this part of the land, having emerged from a lake by the penance and meditation of Kashyap Rishi, shall not lose its identity. I emphasize, shall not lose its identity to adversity of tyranny of some historical periods, and manipulative socio-political trickery. I also emphasize the point, the manipulative socio-political trickery to lose its character of mutual respect among all in the section in common population. In the population, patriotism to be the core character of the people, and no hatred on the basis of ethnicity and religious beliefs. To be the core character of the people and no hatred on the basis of the ethnicity and religious beliefs. The sainthood of the land as it is known, Rishwar, I repeat, the sainthood of the land as it is known, Rishwar, shall not be lost to the manipulations and the ill definitions. His affiliation to Kashmir, the land of his birth, has been very rich. He was inspired by Shrivat, Hargopal Kohl, and the organization RSS. Amarnath Vaishnavi was born on 24th August 1925, about a month before RSS was founded. He had already arrived on the earth when his ideology's resource to affiliate to had come up as an organization. He was here in the cradle of his mother to welcome the organization that he spent his life into for good of the nation and its population. He, even as a child, was very sensitive to the happenings in the surroundings, and his enthusiastic restlessness settled when he joined RSS in 1945. The activist and the activism in him and the resource organization of his outlook kept him eternally youthful because of his remarkable ability to live in present and look forward to future. I repeat it. His outlook kept him eternally youthful because of his remarkable ability to live in present and look forward to future. I have some personal references. I will not be making them here because of, I know the time cry restraints. Amarnath Vaishnavi was qualified in fine arts. This got him first job as an art teacher. By this time, he was established and well-known social worker with a bent of mind towards RSS ideology. In 1948, when RSS was banned, he had to go underground to avoid arrest. And soon he got a job in Arya School, Pathankot. He moved to Pathankot with his zeal and mission unshattered and found due place for himself in his profession and social activism. He, under the pressure of the parents, came back to Kashmir and joined Education Department. His activism joining a government department in J&K then did not deter him again. When he was posted in higher secondary school, Handawara in 1960, he, for the first time as an NCC officer of the school, organized a public function in the school and hoisted the tricolor. His postings, wherever he was transferred in his service, saw him doing patriotic activism and public participation. In Ladakh, he worked for social settlement with a deep national perspective. He engaged children and youth in sports and community teams to play games and organize debates for social well-being and patriotic outlook. Strengthening the community culture of the region as its ancestry. Strengthening the community culture of the region as per its ancestry. Praja Parishad movement was launched in Jammu. Dr. Shama Prasad Mukherjee, the then president of Bharatiya Jansangh, had sent a group of volunteers to Jammu in support of the Praja Parishad. Posters were to be prepared for the function. To voice dissent against the
Motilal ji, please mute yourself.
Shall I carry on? Shall I carry on, Rohini?
Yes, yes, please go ahead.
I'll read it from the paragraph. Praja movement was launched in Jammu. Dr. Shama Prasad Mukherjee, the then president of Bharatiya Jan Sangh, had sent a group of volunteers to Jammu in support of the Praja Parishad. Posters were to be prepared for the function to voice dissent against the permit system for non-state subjects who were by law denied entry into Jammu and Kashmir. There was a requirement to print the posters for the function, but no press was ready to print the posters, as it was an unlawful activity then. Amarnath Vaishnavi took it on himself to prepare posters by hand. Being a trained art teacher, he prepared a stencil and hand printed 200 posters during the night and made the posters available to the co-workers. The posters were in place before the break of the dawn. Late Arun Jaitley, the former finance minister of India and a distinguished lawyer, writes, I quote, Amarnath Vaishnavi was a patriot by core who played pioneering role in the Prajapat movement and subsequent pro-national movements in the state of Jammu and Kashmir's total integration with the Indian Union. This was commented by Shri Arun Jaitley. His work and influence on the national scene for welfare of Kashmir can be understood by the words of Dr. Jitendra Singh, Minister of State and Prime Minister's office, when he writes in his preface on the book, I quote, Pandit Amarnath Vaishnavi's lifelong struggle and consistent endure for socio-political reforms deserves to be recorded in the history of region. His life was intertwined with major socio-political events in Jammu and Kashmir, as he himself was a major force. Special emphasis needs to be given to recognize this sentence. As he himself was a major force behind some of the landmark events that left an indelible mark on the destiny of the people, particularly the minority community of Kashmiri Pandits, unquote. There was a major social disaster inflicted on Kashmiri Pandits community in 1967, when individual as well as social living as an independent identity of faith and free will was traversed with the help of then government machinery. Amarnath Vaishnavi emerged as a distinguished community leader. He coined a slogan, Jai Kara Har Har Mahadev, that became the high spirited shout to sustain a big social agitation. A major catastrophe that fell on the Kashmiri community in recent times in the year 1990, when the minority community was forced to flee. The exodus of Kashmiri Pandit community from their ancestral land. Here again, Amarnath Vaishnavi, as a community worker, as an RSS worker, did three major contributions. I've categorized his contributions in 3 points. Number one, there was an influx of people escaping death and reaching Jammu. He, along with his other associates, established Gita Bhavan, the first transit camp at Jammu. Gita Bhavan is a Jammu community asset. He and his associates made such a warm and cordial relationship with the management of the Gita Bhavan that they provided the space and first basic support structure for the survival of the displaced Kashmiri Pandit community in dire situation. Since every Jammuwala has been extending warm support to Kashmiri Pandit brothers and sisters to live in a compassionate life of warm social bond. Number three, he and his associates coordinated with the other agencies both in the country and worldwide to get the immediate survival support and further the welfare of the Kashmiri Pandit community to help the families to look forward to life progressively. His selfless commitment to the nation and its population can be understood by an incident when his adopted son, Ganesh Kumar Vaishnavi, was transferred to a treacherous place where he had to walk up a mountain track of 30 kilometers to reach his office. His son tried to plead with his father for his intervention. Dr. Jitendra Singh, Minister of State in PMO, referring to this incident, writes, I quote, Amarnath retorted back and declined to do anything. Instead, he admonished Ganesh Kumar and told him to recall sacrifice of Guru Gobind Singh and never compromise for the self. The result was he had to remain there for 6 years instead of 1 year posting as practice, unquote. Each of the 10 chapters of the book reveal teams of associates along with their names that makes it evident how Amarnath Vaishnavi worked as a team member to carry forward a mission, a big mission, to see the spirit of universal brotherhood in the family of Rishwar. I had the opportunity to meet Atal Bihari Vajpayee when I was writing a book on his poems. I read poems to him bearing a reference to his ideology. I read a stanza here. Atal Bihari's bond and stand, prime and paramount is motherland, faith, belief, trust, and reverence must never be in defiance. And Amarnath Vaishnavi had the same spirit for the nation. When I interviewed him on his last visit to Delhi at his brother's residence in Dwarika, one thing came up clear. That is, in this class of people, I refer to Atalji and Sannyas, Amarnathji. In this class of people, speak to them on national welfare, patriotism, and social harmony. There comes abundance of radiance in their aura. I conclude my word on this book by putting on record that it has taken 6 years for the author Balkrishna Sannyasi to research into the life and the social work of Amarnath Vaishnavi to write Chronicles of Kashmir, a biography of late Sri Amarnath Vaishnavi. I must congratulate the strenuous, sincere efforts of Rohini Vaishnavi, the author of the book, who has been the driving force for the author to write this book of purpose. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you, Arvind Shahji. Thank you very much. It was a wonderful summary. Now I would request the author, Sri Balkrishna Sannyasi, to say a few words to us.
Yes, Rohini ji, my namaskar to all the panelists who are present here and to all those dignitaries who are with us in this program today connected. As we all know, today Kashmir is taking world's attention, probably because the events that took place during the last 3 decades. And many books have been written during this period. What's more important to say is that the community in exile, Kashmiri Pandits, they have contributed a lot to the literature in exile, whether it is poetry, it is fiction, it is novel side or dramas, and even the books which are of historical importance. Connoting, rather depicting the exodus, the reasons as to why this exodus has been thrust upon the people who left and who are these refugees in their own country, all they have written. This book, Chronicles of Kashmir, is a biography of Amarnath Vaishnavi, which takes us to so many historical events right now since 1931. particularly from 1947 to 2012. This period actually coincides with the actual lifetime of octogenarian, who was a social activist and a reformer at the grassroots level. But Amarnath Vaishnavi was among the founders of the nationalist movement in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And that's how he was witness to various socio-political transformations and the events which were there and which have some meaningful connotations when we go deep into those events. This biography actually answers some of the questions of the paradise on earth, such as the events like the terrorism, how it, what were the factors which led to it? Was Kashmir summary decades ago, prior to 1990 when unrest started? What were the events that gave birth to the bloodshed on this paradise? Can there be any change that chance that could make any change in the destiny of Kashmir from what we see today? All these questions and many more have been tried to explained in this book. The Chronicles of Kashmir brings to us a perspective based on the first-hand experience of Pandit Amarnath Vaishnavi, as he was at the helm of some of the social and political change in Kashmir. Or he was an RSS activist. He was president of All State Kashmiri Pandit Conference, Nath and Dharm Yog Sabha for decades, and as a force behind some of the historic events that had an indelible remark on the destiny of Kashmiris, particularly the Kashmiri Hindus. But Amarnath Vaishnavi, as rightly said, had contributed a lot to this movement, which was started from Jammu, Praja Parishad movement by Pandit Dogra, Premnath Dograj. And this movement had then transformed into a big movement, a national movement, wherein Pandit Amarnath ji was jailed in Punjab, Pathankot. And it is here to say that he got connected with the then tallest leaders of the Jat Singh during his jail time. And they were Balraj Madho, PNO, Bhai Mahavir, Jagannath Rao Joshi, many others. When he just got very much connected with their thoughts, and here we can say that his vision got open towards many things regarding the country. And so, but Amarnath Vaishnavi, when he got involved in the agitation, the Buddhist agitation in Ladakh, and made them to realize that they are on the losing side, that they are being exploited. And for that, they strived. They went along with him to just make that agitation successful. He was arrested also there. But as the political pundits now say, that today when we see the Union Territory status for Ladakh, its seeds were sown in that agitation in 1968-69. When Amarnath Vaishnavi, being a visionary, had developed certain concerns, not only about his own state, not only about the community which he served and which he led, as he was called the voice of the Kashmiri Pandits during the period from 1990 onwards. But he had developed certain, because for him, Kashmir would always mean nation, India, And when we talk about the nation, he would say Kashmir. So these were two inseparable parts of the country, or rather two inseparable entities. And when he would talk about all these, the concerns which he had developed were tremendous. He was very much concerned about the community, which had rendered the refugee status without legally getting the refugee status. What about them? What will be the future of the children of this community for which he strived during all these years? And he was successful in getting their admissions in technical colleges and other places. But more than that, he was concerned because he was very much connected. He was very much eyewitness he had about the blunders. He was eyewitness to Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru's lecture in Lal Chowk, Srinagar in 1947, wherein Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru induced the idea of plebiscite into the minds of the majority community of the Kashmir, forgetting that he was considering himself a secular leader, and thereafter he was talking about a particular majority of particular area. Anyway, then the U-turn taken by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru in 1962, when he said in the same Lal Chowk, "Kaisi Rai Shumari, kahan ki Rai Shumari?" And then again, when Sheikh Mohammed Abdullah was released in 1963, and then Pandit Nehru sent him as his emissary to Pakistan, to General Ayub, with a proposal of confederation of this Kashmir, our part of Kashmir, and the Kashmir which is under Pak occupation, which was rejected completely by General Ayub, without asking the parliament, without taking into consideration his cabinet colleagues' view. But Jawaharlal Nehru took this step. So all these turnovers, which Amarnath Vaishnavi was seeing, and he was looking into it about what will happen tomorrow, about the country. And so I have taken care of his concerns also. Concerns about the community in distress, concerns about his own state, concerns about the nation. He would talk to me. When we talk, he would say about the legacy which we have taken from our right since early 90s, from our ancestors, from our political masters who are fighting for the independence, for the cause of independence. So I have talked about the legacy, wherein I have talked about the partition of Bengal, 1905-1906, and its aftermath, the supporting of Khilafat movement in 1921 and its aftermath, and then accepting partition and its aftermath, and the prevailing situation in Kashmir, to which I call a political behavior of political convenience, which is very much existent in our country today. And what will it lead us to? I have talked about that. So I feel this book is very much important for our countrymen. I wish that all and sundry in our country must go through this book, because it tells us what is there in our fate for the future, for tomorrow, so that citizens of the country can just understand and make up their mind where we as Indians stand. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Now I would request Dr. Sudhir Sopuri to say something to us.
Thank you. Namaskar, everybody.
Namaskar.
At the outset, I wish to congratulate Mr. Balkrishan Sannyasi ji, who did an extensive work for almost 6 to 7 years, as it was mentioned, consulted many people, and the diaries of his own diaries, which were written there. And also Rohini ji for her inputs in editing this volume and to bring this book in this present format. I'm sure this book will be read far and wide. we heard Kaveri ji, Arvind ji, and Balkrishan ji, and they talked in details on the content and the context of the book, and very lucidly brought out the role of our Pandit Amarnath Vaishnavi ji in the historical context of that time, both since right from the beginning of independence and more so after 1990. Among the innumerable achievements of Amarnath ji as a social activist and a reformer and a giant leader of KP community, which have been mentioned as I was just talking about by earlier speakers, I personally find its role in helping the community in various ways, mostly after the mass exodus of KPs from the valley. And he played a very important role at that time. And looking into that role of Pandit Vaishnaviji's at that time, I'm actually reminded of what Dr. Spokes, he's a US author, has written. And he says, more often than not, survivors of trauma lack words to express their grief and fear. It is only great social workers who can recognize their needs and respond. They can speak hopes into the heart of the hurting. That I think was actually the role which Vaishnavi played after around 1990. To me, one of his major contributions at that time was to see that none of our young boys and girls remain uneducated. He knew that proper education will not only help them to survive, but also become financially independent. But over the years, they can also become leaders in their own field of studies or in their own domains. And by and large, this has come true. The children who have risen from Jammu and other refugee camps added in important campuses in different parts of the country and also abroad. So to me, his story, which is from refugee camps to campuses, and this story was driven by Vaishnavi and other members at that time. I feel his dream to bring every family out of distress is not yet complete. More people are working in this direction. I'm very happy that Rohini ji is carrying forward this dream, having created RV Learning Foundation, skilling boys and girls and supporting many people with different fellowships. But a lot more needs to be done. Now, contemplating on the life of Amarnath ji, I was wondering, because he has done so much, as was mentioned and it's written in the book, that how does one person get so much of inspiration towards rendering selfless service? What kind of inspiration comes from? Day in and day out and throughout one's life. This thought has also been with me since when I was at JNU, because I sometimes found that there are certain students, when you tell them to do something, they will come forward and help and do whatever is asked of them. Whereas there are others who would have many kinds of excuses and will not do anything. So in this context, I have been reading some general and specialized articles on what is called as the sociology of service, which has been a subject of interest for many people, researchers around the globe. And according to Sagawa, he's a senior fellow at Harvard College, he says the service changes the lives of those performing the service. And that service is not just nice, it is sometimes necessary. So there is a concept among sociologists that the spirit of service can be inculcated. However, there are others who feel that this is probably inborn. To me, it seems that this trait was both inborn and cultivated in Amarnath ji. In fact, as they say, the desire for selfless service starts from within. Now, community service, as you say, community service, volunteerism, mentorship, when all these things are put in the right context, which Amarnath ji did so well, it can become a great tool to achieve good for the society. Most of us know the word community, which has been derived from two words of Latin, namely com and munis. In English, com means together, and munis means to serve. Being together, thus, is very important for a community to perform in its own best interest and also for the rest of the society. In his book on the sociology of community connections, this author which has written this book is Brun, he brings out very candidly how we need to interact and connect as individuals and as groups. And he writes, and I quote, networks of communities that are interdependent, diverse, and responsive to change, yet cohesive. That's very important, to be cohesive. Provide the infrastructure for a healthy society. So a cohesive society can be one which can provide a lot of service to the society. And I think personally this cohesiveness, this kind of community living, this which we wish to evolve even today, was one of the major factor which Amarnath ji brought in his work culture. Though our desire is that we should continue on that path, but at present, we find that especially after 90s, many more KP organizations took birth in Jammu and all across the country. Each one of these new organizations, they are doing good work in their own domain, trying to preserve the culture, Kashmiri culture, also helping the needy, and broadly presenting their own solutions to the problem of Kashmiri Pandits. And as a consequence of these new organizations which have come up, a lot of new leadership has been emerged, and many of them are doing great services. However, what we need today, if we have to follow at what Vaishnavi did, I think Vaishnavi actually had the trust of the community, and who himself also had great faith in the resilience of the community. And therefore, I think the new leadership has to come up to the level of his standing in order to bring that connectedness between all these groups together. I only wish that all these groups can work together. Now, personally for me, what are the lessons that I've learned from the life of Amarnath ji? And for me, there are two important lessons which I learned. One thing is have confidence in yourself. Now, his life fits well in this quote. The best way is not to feel hopeless, is to get up and do something. If you go out and make effort, some good things will happen. You will fill the world with hope. You will fill yourself with hope. That's what he was. And the second lesson I learned from his life, stand for the truth and selfless service. He believed in what I think, what Angela Davis writes, I'm no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I'm changing the things I cannot accept. That was the change which he brought in Kashmiri Pandit society. So from the life of Amarnath ji, actually, many lessons can be learned. And these are brought out very well in this book. So I recommend that this book be read by our younger generation. And as Kaveri ji was mentioning, also the generation, our own generation of people, because I know many people are still ignorant about, unaware of the contributions done by our leaders, immense contributions they have done to the society. So this book I also find very interestingly, it has brought out the contacts which Vaishnavi ji had with different people. And at the end of the book, they have also written about him Dr. Ms. Shah has written about it, and there are other social workers and community leaders who wrote about his work and his contributions. Interestingly, some of them are today with us. I can see ML Malla Sahib there, Kundan Kashmiri ji there, Ashwani Charangu here. I think they have written about this work of Vaishnavi ji. I only, in the end, I pray that his memory live with us and let his ideas and vision guide us in future. Let us give our best service to the community, and more importantly, in the present situation, we'll all have to work together. And I always say, we may have different views, but we should have one vision for the Kashmiri Pandit community. Once again, congratulations to the author and to the editor. Jaikara, and thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Sopri. Your speech is always inspirational, and you brought out best of the insights from the book, especially the ones which you say should be adopted by our younger generation, and that's very true. And now I would request Shri Raj Nehru ji to please say something to us. Mr. Nehru, over to you. Please unmute yourself.
Am I audible to you?
Yes.
Okay. सबसे पहले तो बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद, शुक्रिया to RV Learning Foundation and Amarnath Vaishnavi Center of Excellence. It's a privilege and an honor to speak about such a wonderful soul and a great leader in an august presence of Padam Shri Pandit Sudhir Sopuri ji, Miss Kaveri Bamdei ji, and Pandit Arvind Shah ji. I'm glad I got a copy in advance to read this book, The Chronicles of Kashmir, written by Pandit Balkishan Sannyasi ji and edited by you, Rohini ji. It's really a lovely piece of work that you people have developed, very insightful and informative piece. I think my strong recommendation is that every Kashmiri Pandit, especially the young ones, must read this book. It has been written in a very simple yet powerful way that has brought forth the struggle of Kashmiri Pandits for its pride, existence, progress, and survival. Despite being a minority and caught between the destructive forces, and the role of Shri Amarnath Vaishnavi ji in managing and steering that that fight with that spirit. When I was reading this book, it rekindled my all past memories, especially my associations with Shri Pandit Amarnath Vaishnavi ji. It reminded me all that period, the incidents and revolutionary pursuits that we fought under his leadership. I remember many incidents, and one I remember very clearly in 1990s, early 90s, when that was the first time we were jailed for the student struggle. We were two students in the Raghunath Bazar jail, and he came to us in the evening with some food in a packet, and he said in Kashmiri, "Date through." And that was the moment, that pat was a moment when we could spend that entire night fearlessly in that jail. And then there are many incidents to cherish with that gentleman who inspired us across the times. He is a man, I personally feel, who dedicated his whole life. While you have brought this very beautifully in the book, he has delivered his whole life to the service of the society. So when I was reading, you have mentioned social activist. I have a different view about him. I call him a visionary as well as a missionary. Visionary, I call him because when you look at his entire life and what he has been talking and saying, I think he had visualized many decades back the fate of Kashmir and Kashmiri Pandits. And missionary, I call him because he spent the whole of his life, as we heard from the previous speaker, he owned no property. whole of his life to secure, protect, and strengthen the KP community's existence in Kashmir when he was in Kashmir, and also when we moved out of Kashmir and were in the other parts of the country, and he was very eagerly looking how to secure the future. I have personally heard many of his speeches, and in most of the speeches, he always used to say, and I think it came from right from his personal experiences since he was born in Kashmir. He used to say that Kashmir is the head, and rest of the India is the body and limbs, and unless India protects its head, India cannot be safe. And this is something that he used to talk every time whenever I used to interact with him. So कल हिंदुस्तान अगर ये मत ठीक थवन हिंदुस्तान से रोज नहीं ठीक तम वरे कहीं. So being a management professional, when I read this book, and when I see him, I'm amazed to see his leadership and organizational skills that are unmatchable. You see, we work in an environment to manage and grow our organizations. हम आज कहीं भी काम करते हैं, professional organizations में काम करते हैं, social organizations में काम करते हैं, and it's very easy because we are in control of things. Because we are in control of environment, we are in control of surroundings, we are working in a non-threatening environment today. But look at him. He not only managed but strengthened and led his organization, All State Kashmiri Pandit Conference, to grow and become a huge banyan tree in an environment that was antagonistic as well as demoralizing. On the one side, I was reading in the book, he used to be referred as a Sanghi, and on the other side, such pursuits were discouraged in Kashmir, and yet he made Ask PC a very strong KP organization and a strong community voice in Kashmir. And people trusted him. And when people are selflessly serving others with a strong character and competence to deliver, you are trusted only then. You become trustworthy only then. And these were the qualities he demonstrated. And that's why people rallied behind him. People looked up to him for solutions that we were going through, whether in Kashmir or outside Kashmir. So my message to many people, when you read this book, one needs to learn his organizational management and leadership skills from his approach and from his thinking. Perhaps it's in our traits as Kashmiris, it's in our traits that we are horizontal and vertical thinkers, but this book has given enough examples. Because I was reading many pages where Balkishanji has beautifully brought out the contribution of the first time Kashmiris in various fields, whether they are Supreme Court judges or whether they were the governors somewhere or whether they were the engineers somewhere or scientists somewhere, beautifully brought in because it's part of our Kashmiri traits. The book has clearly articulated the rich traits of receptivity and tolerance, even for the contrarian views that Kashmiris have demonstrated. And especially the way the community has nurtured a civilization for love and humanity. I think I remember once I spoke to him about why are Kashmiri Pandits, or many people I remember in 90s used to say that Kashmiri Pandits were given preferences and non-Kashmiri Pandits were not given preferences. And he used to say one thing, I remember this very clearly. He said, Dekho, whether it was Sanskrit, Prakrit, Pali, Tibetan, Sharda, Persian, Urdu, Hindi, English, he used to say Kashmiri Pandits had developed the adaptability and flexibility to learn and adapt, not only to various cultures, but to various languages. And that is the reason, so that was the one of the reasons ki Kashmir and Button was preference milan by every regime, ki ye masa is bad kalamdar, ye masa is har kun cheez was flexible, har kun cheez was innovative, kahti languages tim fatafat hechan. And I can clearly feel that one of the reasons why we were preferred by the regimes over others was our flexibility, our creativity, or the narrative that many people sometimes used to create that the non-Kashmiri Pandits were not getting opportunities. I think one of the reasons was, I think two reasons. One was that primarily because the non-KPs, there was an orthodoxy in their clergy who prevented them from learning new things, learning new languages, learning new methods of work. And the second was one of the biggest reasons, which also is highlighted in this book, is that, Kashmiri Pandits were, non-Kashmiris were artisans, and they had some other trades to pursue. And that was one of the reasons why they could not excel, and not the other reasons that Pandits were given the preferences. So the qualities of perseverance, persistence, and great perceptors, imaginators, courageous in their pursuits is beautifully articulated in this book when I read many contributors that Balkishan ji has beautifully brought in this book. And today, when we complain of situations not favorable, just imagine how under those daunting conditions, Amarnath Vaishnavi ji would have to work and fight back. His presence in Kashmir for that people, for that period, will never be forgotten, because when I was reading the contribution he has made during the agitations that have happened in Kashmir, the famous agitations of 1967, and then the other agitations from time to time. And it was his presence that made Sheetalnath temple the Kurukshetra for KPs. Sumyar and Porshiyar and Ganpatiyar, they are today fondly remembered for all those agitations that he actually, nurtured and made people to come out, and they became the arenas for many Kashmiri Pandits to fight back. So to me, when I read this book, I find him a great galvanizer who galvanized the entire community, not for the vicinity and vicinity. And when I say vicinity and vicinity, today, most of the leadership is focused on Habakadal versus Ranawari versus some other region, Sopur versus Anantnag versus some other region. He was the man who traveled from one district to another district, as I read the book, and galvanized the whole community to come together. And that is a great learning for most of us when we look beyond, to look beyond these small micro leadership things, where we look at the rural and the urban part of the community and start dwelling our leadership on that. I think these are some of the great organizational acumen skills that one needs to learn. I remember at one of the pages, it is very beautifully mentioned, which he also mentioned during one of my conversations. He I think had met General B.M. Kaul during 1967, which is also mentioned in the book, when in Delhi, General Kaul told the entire group led by Vaishnavi ji that, if Kashmiri Pandits have to survive in Kashmir, they have to be like commandos. And when I say commandos, it doesn't mean pick up the gun. It means be fearless, be selfless, be strong, be purposeful, and be integrated. And that's what Vaishnavi ji has been doing all these years. I think his significant contributions, I personally feel as a student leader, and then when I moved into the other personal pursuits, I feel in 1990s, one of the biggest thing he was very keen was on protecting the educational career, the apartheid that was happening at that time in Jammu with the Kashmiri Pandit students. That apartheid he wanted to break, and he encouraged many of the youngsters at that time. I remember the Akhil Bharatiya Vidyarthi Parishad group that we had at that time, many good leaders, Sanjay Ganju, Parikshit, Sanjay Kachuru, Dilip Kachuru, and Siddharth Zarabi, Manoj, many people of that time. He encouraged many of us, and we started a mass agitation. I remember we had to travel across the country to communicate to the whole India that what happened to Kashmiri Pandits. And many of us, including people from the other organizations today, we traveled with his blessings. And then on 11th September, we had a Kashmir Chalo March, where 10,000 and more people were brought to Jammu to have a voice for Kashmiri Pandits being heard, that was heard across the nation. So I think his biggest contribution when I read the book and when I see my personal experiences, the start of the camp colleges. The fight he made us to fight was how to create camp colleges, camp schools, and how to help those students who were doing engineering and medicine, and how to get them migrated outside Kashmir to other colleges. And that's all because the fight he helped us to nurture when we were in Jammu. And unfortunately, we had some divergence. He had a different view about the return of Kashmiri Pandits, while some had a different view. But he always tried to bring all of the community together, and I can quote many examples. But the beauty in in this is that the way this book has been written, I think it's very, very important for youngsters to read this book. I get a quote which I always remember: until the lion has its own storyteller, the history of hunt will always glorify hunters. And this is the way you have really glorified the real line of Kashmir, Shri Amarnath Vaishnavi ji. I compliment you and congratulate you for bringing this book, and I feel really honored to be getting this opportunity to speak on this occasion. Thank you once again and congratulations.
Thank you, Rajji. I mean, I'm spellbound hearing you for the last more than 10 minutes. The person bond that you shared with him, and so much more that you had to share. And I'm surprised that within a few days you have been able to read so much of the book. Thank you so much for giving us your insights. It was lovely to hear you. We have with us today Shri Motilal Mallaji. We also have Shri Ashwini Tranguji. And I would first of all invite rather Shri Motilal Mallaji to speak to us. Shri Motilal Mallaji has been associated with Pandit Amarnath Vaishnavi. He's been with him before Exodus and after Exodus. So I'm sure he has something to tell us. आप प्लीज अपने आप को अनम्यूट कर लीजिए.
हाँ वैष्णवी जी आ गया.
हाँ जी आ गया.
नमस्कार सर्वत्र. Long association with Shri Amarnath Ji Vaishnavi has inculcated really a spirit of this, that fervor, patriotic fervor in me. I will refer a shloka the way I have found him. Yatha chitam tatha vacha tatha kriya. Chite vache kriyayam cha sadhunam ekurupa. The way he would speak, the way he would act, जैसे उसके मन में था वैसे ही उसके जुबान पर भी था और वैसे ही उसके क्रिया भी थी. ये कांस्टेंट लिंकेज जो थी इन बिटवीन थॉट, वर्ड एंड डीड, दिस वाज a tremendous quality in him जो मैंने वैष्णवी जी को पर्सनली what I had observed in him. तो इसी अवस्था में उसकी निर्भीकता, उसकी साधना, उसकी तपस्या, क्षमा, दमा, तपा और आर्जम जो मैं उनमें देख रहा था, it has left an indelible impression on me, not even in me in particular, but to all the people who were associated with him. हंदवारा में उसके patriotism को मैंने एक बार देखा था. You have mentioned in your book. So while hoisting the flag, national flag, Ghulam Qadir Masala was the MLA, the then MLA, Bakshi Saab ke regime. He didn't stand up. And there was no speaker also to speak. Loud speaker का अभाव था. लेकिन वैष्णवी जी के सिम गर्जना के साथ एकदम चिल्लाया, मसाला, stand up. There is national anthem at this time being played by the people. और ये निर्भीकता जो अमरनाथ जी वैष्णवी में थी, ये एक विशेष गुण था. एक सात्विक गुण उनमें एक और था, जो नारी शक्ति के प्रति उसकी भावना जो थी. हता कि मैं उससे personally I was very much acquainted with his personal life. He would also disclose something inner secrets to me because I was totally involved with him for the long 60 years. It was a long spell of life with him. तो यथा यत्र नार्या पूजन्ते रमन्ते तत्र देवता यत्र नार्या न पूजन्ते अफला तेषां क्रिया. जिस भावना से उसने अपनी पत्नी व्रत का धारण किया था, जिस भावना से उसके अपने पूर्व जन्म को उसने याद करके उसकी उस भावना को आलापा था अपने जीवन में, उस पत्नी व्रत धर्म को मैं उसको प्रणाम करता हूँ सदैव. जो उसके साथ सदैव उसके फोटो में उसके जेब में सदैव रहती थी. ये मुझे दिखाया, ये देखो मेरी पत्नी का ये चित्र जो है आपको दिखाता हूँ. और उसकी ब्रीफिंग जो आपने किताब में भी लिखा है बालकृष्ण जी ने, वो हो मुझे उसने दर्शाया. It had a long spell of effect on my culture. कितने उसके धैर्य था, समान उसमें जो था नारी व्रत के भावना में. इतना ही नहीं, he was always terror while speaking on the stage. निर्भीकता मैंने पहले कहा एक गुण उसमें था जो निर्भय था, लेकिन हृदय से कोमल, बहुत स्वभाव से बड़े मीठे, लेकिन एक्शन में, क्रिया में उनकी स्थूलता थी जो सदैव उसे दर्शाती थी। उनकी भावना, उसकी दृढ़ निश्चय, उसका दृढ़ संकल्प और दृढ़ धैर्यता, ये this had a long impact on our culture, on our people, on the people who were associated with him for long. ये तो विशेष कर उनमें एक गुण था। तभी मैं सदैव कहता हूँ गुणम प्रशस्वमारूपम शीलम प्रशस्वमाकुलम। गुणों की का बखान करना चाहिए, गुणों की ओर आकृष्ट होना चाहिए। रूप, सौंदर्य, यौवन और शील, स्वभाव, ये एकमात्र सब उनका रूप होता है। वंश रूप का आधार की ओर से नहीं देखना चाहिए। ये वैष्णवी जी की सदैव याद रहेगी। वो मैं उसे आज पर्सनली, पहले भी हमने कहा है, जैसे महाभारत के समय देवव्रत ने भीष्म की प्रतिज्ञा की थी, वैसे वैष्णवी जी को मैं आज अपने समाज का भीष्म के रूप से मानता हूँ। वही भीष्म पितामह का चरित्र ही उसे स्वरूप को प्रकट किया है अपने कश्मीरी समुदाय में। सदैव परमात्मा उनको सदगति दे, ये मेरी इच्छा प्रबल इच्छा है। धन्यवाद रोहित जी।
धन्यवाद मल्ला साहब, थैंक यू सो मच फॉर बीइंग हियर। नाउ आई रिक्वेस्ट अश्विनी त्रुंगू जी, सर प्लीज आप हमसे कुछ कहिए।
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
After listening such a great elucidated point of views by many of us who are present here, I feel this is my proud privilege to be in a position to make my point of view known here about Vaishnavi ji. For me, Vaishnavi ji is a legacy of Kashmiri Pandits. Somebody asking me at a particular point of time, some decades ago, that whom do you consider the 5 prominent personalities, historical personalities of Kashmiri Pandits over the last 1 century? I straightway said that it starts with Pandit Hargopal Kol, then Pandit Kashyap Bandhu, then Justice Ziyalal Kalam, thereafter Pandit Shivnarayan Photedar and Pandit Amarnath Vaishnavi. It is in this way that we can pick up the 5 great Kashmiri Pandits who led Kashmiri Pandit community from the front and led them successfully. Amarnath ji Vaishnavi was not only a leader per se, he was fundamentally an inspiration for people like us during 1960s, 70s, and 80s in Kashmir. It is very easy nowadays to think in terms of doing some kind of a social work, as has been enunciated by my dear brother and friend Raj Nehru ji. Yes, that is true what he said. But it was very difficult when people during 40s, 50s, and 60s, and even 70s were asked to do some kind of a work regarding the nation, the society, and the ideology. Particularly, the ideological impact would impact everything in the life. And it would impact even the personal life of a person leading a position. He was a front leader, was not a front runner, but he was the front leader of the community for a long time. And I haven't seen any Kashmir Pandit for the last 60 years of my life doing so dedicated work in regard to Kashmiri Pandit community as I have seen Vaishnavi ji doing. I would like to clarify one thing about Vaishnavi ji. Many people would say that Vaishnavi ji had a particular class of ideology and would stick to that. But one thing was wonderful about Vaishnavi ji, he would also adjust with the times. Change, he accepted many a times, so far as the position was concerned. The positions one would take in politics, the positions one would take in social work, how and when change has to be accepted as a natural process in life. Vaishnavi ji was a master of it. And I knew him doing many things which many people would not expect him to do. And he was successful in his pursuits also. That I can say. I had a very proud privilege to be with him for almost more than 4 decades. And then having toured Kashmir, various districts in Kashmir, in Jammu, then in Punjab, then in Himachal Pradesh, Delhi, Maharashtra, even Europe, London, I have been associated with him in those tours, programs. And what I gathered from him was that what people perceived him to be, he was not actually that. He was more modern in his outlook. In his outlook, he was really modern. There is no doubt in it. That I have seen very intimately. And he would always have a great connect with the younger generations. This book, so far as Balaji Sannyasi is concerned, unfortunately, I could not get a copy of it because of the circumstances that are prevailing at this time throughout the country, particularly in Jammu and Kashmir state. We could not have a program here. But gathering from what has been written by Balaji Sannyasi, because he would be talking to me about the book over the last 5 to 6 years, I can simply thank him, because I believe he has done what otherwise I would have done. So he has done, in fact, he has accomplished my mission. I'm so happy about it, that such a masterpiece he has brought out, for which there should be a good connect of the book with the people. That I would like, that this book should go to the people and it can make a connect of the society, a connect of the future generations, the generations to come with Vaishnavi ji. One thing I would like to, I do not know whether that has been covered in the book or not, but that is also a very important thing during Punjab terrorism. He was the one who led Balidani Jatha from Jammu and Kashmir state and joined the main Jatha in Punjab and toured whole of Punjab for almost 100 days. It was a daring devil act at that time, what he did at that particular age and with that kind of a health situation. But he led that Balani Jatha, and I believe we all bow to him because of his that courage. And that courage was always one of his natural pursuits. It was not something that he had acquired. It was a business of his, that is known as courage. So we have been always inspired by him. This book, I believe, will give a representative, historical representation to the younger generations. And in this way, I believe this will be a great tribute to a leader of a great community. Being the leader of any community in the world is one thing, but being a leader of Kashmiri Pandits is really great. It is not an ordinary thing to be the leader, and that too with such a mass appeal and acceptability. I believe Vaishnavi ji deserved to be our leader. He is my leader. He still remains my leader. And at the end, the concluding part would be that there is a wonderful song that he would always sing, and I today, on the occasion of this release of the book, would dedicate the same song to him that he would always sing when we would join together and would sing it together. It was like तन समर्पित मन समर्पित और ये जीवन समर्पित चाहता हूं देश की धरती तुम्हें कुछ और भी दो. That he would sing along with us, and really he proved what is in the verse. He proved the spirit of the song, and he converted the words into deeds. Thank you very much. Jaikara, Har Har Mahadev.
Thank you, Ashwini ji. Thanks for your inputs. Some of the things that you just said, we were actually planning to have this event offline, both in Jammu and Delhi. However, the pandemic, and we are planning still to have an offline event in Jammu once everything goes well, and we might as well have in Delhi. We just have to, we still have to take a call on that. And regarding the availability of the book, it's available worldwide actually on Amazon, and on Amazon and Flipkart, both in India. So thank you very much. Now, in the end, we have a very special person over here, Shri Hridaynathji Bhatt. He's here with us, and Bharti Rena is also here, his daughter. Hridaynathji Bhatt is like a family, was like a family to Amarnath Vaishnavi ji, because I also lived there in 1990 till 92, and we lived in the same house. And after we left, Amarnath Vaishnavi ji refused to come to Delhi because he wanted to be in Jammu. That was his karma bhumi. And after we left in 1992, Hridaynathji Rena and his daughters Bharti and Rachna, they have been his family till 2012, and he was with them actually when he breathed his last. So Hridaynathji, namaskar Mara. Please unmute yourself.
Namaskar.
Namaskar.
Pandit Amarnath ji asa ٲسۍ نمتہٕ پٮ۪ٹھ مےٚ سۭتۍ ٲسۍ اکھ فیملی اکھ یہِ اوس مےٚ باسان یہِ چھُ میون پِتاجی بہٕ چھُس أمِس لڑکہٕ أسۍ ہسا ٲسۍ یِتھی اَسہِ ہسا یِم دۄہ گُزٲرۍ تِم ہسا کٔڑۍ ٹھیٖک پٲٹھۍ اَسہِ مگر ٲخرس منٛز یِتھ کٔنۍ یِمو ستھ گتی نِیہِ سُہ ہسا چھُ مےٚ وُنہِ تہِ یاد یِمو کِتھ کٔنۍ نِیہِ ستھ گتی سۄ ہسا چھنہٕ یِمن بڑٮ۪ن بڑٮ۪ن مہاتمان تہِ تِتھ کٔنۍ ٲسمٕژ بڑٮ۪ن وٕچھن تہِ مےٚ وٕچھمٕتۍ مہاتما چھِ تِمن تہِ چھنہٕ یۄس یِمو ستھ گتی نی صُبحن ہسا ؤتھۍ وارٕ کارٕ شانہٕ ہن کٔرٕکھ بھگوانس کٔرٕکھ پوٗزا صافہٕ ہن گٔنڈِکھ پتہٕ گٔے أکِس گنڈنس تورٕ آیہِ بتہٕ کھیوٚکھ اوٚڑ گنٹہٕ گوٚو یہِ نسا چھُنہٕ تران فِکری تِمو کِتھ کٔنۍ نی یہِ ستھ گتی تِم ہسا گٔے اَسہِ ہسا کریو بڑٕ کوٗشِش مگر سُہ ہسا اسلیے چھُس مہراج یُتُے چھُ مےٚ وَنُن تِمن ہسا ستھ گتی تِمن ہسا چھُ سۄرگس منٛز جاے مےٚ نسا چھُنہٕ وٕچھمٕژٕے یِژھ ستھ گتی کٲنٛسہِ اچھا نمسکار مہراج.
Namaskar, namaskar. There are a lot of other people here who are with us tonight. I'm sure every one of you would have wanted to say a lot, because we have invited only those people here who have been closely associated with Pandit Amarnath Vaishnavi. And I wish we had more time, but I do really hope that in future also we will have some more of these gatherings once you all have read the book, and then you will also have something more to share once you have read it. And I would really love to be in those kind of events. But I'm really thankful to everyone for being here tonight. And thank you very much to Raj Nehru ji, to Dr. Sopori, and Kaveri ji. She had to leave at 8:30, so she just messaged me. And thanks to her, Arvind Shahji, thank you very much for having spent the time to prepare such an elaborate book review. And I'm really grateful to everyone tonight for spending your time here with us. And with that, we'll end this session. Thank you, namaskar. But I would like to end this session with the slogan of Pandit Amarnath Vaishnavi. And I want you all to say that. And please unmute yourself. I would want all of
Great.
you
Yes.
Yes, certainly, certainly.
So please take the lead. Jai Kara, Har Har Mahadev.
Jai Kara.
Namaskar.
Thank you, Rohini ji. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rohini ji.
Thank you, Ramesh ji. I can see you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Oh, what's up?
Namaskar.